The Toronto Raptors moved to 500 after a tough loss to the Indiana Pacers, 118-104. First game I've ever bet on in my life, and at the half I felt good because the Raptors were up huge after a 39-point explosion in the second quarter. Unfortunately for the Raptors, they sputter and run out of gas. Fifth game in 7 nights, down Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet, Precious Achiuwa. The Raptors offense musters up 39 points in the entire second half as they surrender 66 to the Pacers. It really was a tale of two halves. Was it fatigue? Was it talent? Or was it just old habits catching up with the Raptors? I'm going to give you my 3 key thoughts. I'm going to give you my takeaway. Maybe I'll eat some humble pie. So if you're new around here, my name is Robert. This is Pensari Basketball. Grab your coffee. Make sure to hit subscribe and like, and let's get to it. So a tale of two halves indeed. If ever that statement held true, it was for this game. It really didn't feel like I recognized the team that came out in the second half. It could be fatigue. Obviously, you play a really tough first half. You really put the pedal to the metal. Maybe you come out in the second half and expect the other team to fold. Your shots don't fall. A couple threes fall for them. Momentum completely shifts and you can't stop it. It's possible. I saw a very different Scottie Barnes in the first half versus the second half. Again, very strange, right? It seems to come and go for him. Does that ankle tighten up at the half? We're not sure. But it seemed that in the first half, he was very engaged and extremely interested in initiating the offense. In the second half, couldn't care less. Thad, you bring it up. Malachi, Gary, OG. It was very egalitarian and it did not work in the Raptors' favor. I have been on record many times saying Barnes is the best decision maker on this team. It feels like the decision to not make decisions is a bad decision for Scottie Barnes. Rough night shooting for Scottie, 4 for 16, quite a few bunnies around the rim, quite a few gettable shots that, quite frankly, haven't seen him miss ever in his NBA career. If I had $1 for every time I brought up that ankle in the last 3 games, I would actually be able to make up the money I lost tonight betting on this team. But to be honest, it just doesn't look right to me. I have a friend of mine, Leo. We've both followed Scottie for a very long time. We've both been huge fans of his. He tuned in to watch Scottie for the first time in a few games. Texted me at the half saying, "What's wrong with Scottie? He just doesn't look right. His defense, is he injured?" Yeah, he's playing hurt and he's trying, but couldn't do it tonight, unfortunately. Gary Trent Jr. it's not really just missing shots. I mean, shots will miss. There were a couple good shots that he took in rhythm. It's the ones that he took out of rhythm that I have an issue with. The same can be said for Chris Boucher. You have a difficult time being critical of a guy who's playing so hard, but unfortunately playing hard and playing smart is not the same. And I wish for better decision making from Chris Boucher, especially when the Raptors offense really needed him to step up tonight. And of course, you're going to look at the box score and you say he had a hell of a night, right? He scored a lot of points. He had a lot of rebounds, but I think there were moments in the game where it felt like he was hurting the team. And that was most true for Gary Trent Jr., just really hunting his own offense in that third quarter. I fully believe he came out of that third quarter saying, I am not ending this game with an 0 for 6 performance. And there's something in the culture of this team, and I'm going to get into it in my third takeaway, but it wasn't great. So I think that in the first half, we saw the ball move to Thaddeus Young. We saw it move through Otto. It wasn't always perfect, but it worked. It really worked. People were moving. People were connected. People were talking. The defense felt extremely engaged. There were multiple efforts. No matter the breakdown, there was always a response from the Raptors defense. In the second half, guys weren't even getting up and down the court. There were guys who were just giving clear blow-bys, clear backdoor, just not rotating. It was very disappointing to see that second half. Yes, I do believe that fatigue played a huge part in it. The Raptors did get into Indiana at 3 a.m. last night. They do lose an hour going from Oklahoma to Indiana. And frankly, they had to play within 22 hours. Well, within 19 hours of finishing the last game, including flights. I mean, this was a schedule loss, if ever. And the Indiana Pacers were the best team in the 4-game stretch. Houston, OKC, Indiana, Detroit. The Pacers were the most talented team in that bunch. Miles Turner, Buddy Hield, Tyrese Hiliburton, Benedict Mathurin. That's an overwhelming amount of talent. Ask yourself the question, if the Pacers and Raptors were melded into one team, who would the 5 starters have been tonight? I think that would pretty much answer any question you have about just how outmatched the Raptors were. Now, did the Pacers just wake up in the second half? The Raptors entered this game as possibly the best fourth quarter team in the NBA. I checked the offensive rating and the plus minus. And honestly, going into the fourth quarter with the game pretty close, I was thinking, okay, here comes that pedal to the metal, and it just never came. Disappointing loss for sure, but there was a lot to take away from, and I hope against the Pistons with Cade out, I think the talent gap will be much smaller for the Raptors. I do expect a win against the Pistons. I do. I don't know if I'm going to bet on it, but I do believe that the Raptors should be favored to win that game. But I think that if I'm Nick Nurse, I am showing them tape of that first half and saying, we were on the verge of blowing this team out, as Gary Trent Jr. was 0 for 6 and Scottie was 2 for 7. It was not hot shooting. So to my second point, let's get into some individual performances. I liked Delano Banton somewhat playing point forward with that second unit. I know it's partly by necessity. He's sort of filling in for Precious Achiuwa, and Malachi Flynn is sort of filling in for him. But I liked the fact that he was hitting shots in rhythm. I liked the shots that he took for the most part. I liked the shots that he took. I liked that he was trying on defense. He's not the greatest defender in the world, but I liked that he was trying. Malachi Flynn, I liked what I saw. It was hit or miss. There were moments where it was, he's been watching a lot of hero ball. I can see that, right? There were moments of a little too much dribbling, but for the most part, he let the offense flow a little bit. Great shot to end the half. Really gave the Raptors a lot of momentum that they lost within 12 seconds of entering that tunnel. His vision for the game is just a little bit better than what I usually complain about with Fred. So I was just happy to see a point guard who can throw an entry pass. It was nice. OG Anunoby, great night. Just absolutely professional performance. I wish he could have shot more. I wish he'd been a bigger part of the offense. I wish some of those Boucher, Gary, even Scottie shots could have gone to OG. I think he would have done a little bit more with it. I don't really see anyone on the Indiana Pacers that could have stopped OG Anunoby inside if he had just gone for it. I think there's a player type that they just don't have between Benedict Mathurin, who is quite frankly a pylon, Tyrese Hiliburton, Buddy Hield. None of these guys are great defenders. And yes, Miles Turner does present some shot blocking inside, but I do believe that the Raptors, had they stuck to the inside-out game that they were playing in the first half with Thaddeus Young, they would have been a lot more successful in the second half. Unfortunately, in the second half, they revert to old habits, and that brings me to my third takeaway, which is that old habits do die hard. If you've read the book Atomic Habits, you know that if you've become conditioned to responding to certain situations in a certain way, that it becomes very difficult, the more you do it, to do anything but that when you're faced with similar situations. Again, there are a lot of players on this team that the minute the team misses a couple of shots, their first instinct is to completely scrap the game plan and go one-on-one. Saw it with Gary a lot. Saw it a little bit with OG. It was just very successful for OG. This brings me to my last point from the previous game, which is that it seems like this team's identity is to isolate when things get tough, is to completely stop moving without the ball, to stop cutting, to stop making the extra pass, to stop swinging to the open shooter. It was weird. It was strange to watch that at the half that you could have thought about this game and said, hey, everything that's going well for us, let's just completely abandon that and do something completely different in the second half. The Raptors get a couple of calls that don't go their way, but overall, seems to be an identity thing of, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get myself going. The way to get yourself going sometimes is to make good passes, is to get to the line, is to get inside, to get a paint touch. It's not to jack up the shot the second you touch it. There are so many guys on this team that, frankly, Fred, Pascal being out, Precious being out, three of the biggest defenders of this for sure. But Boucher, Gary Trent, right, Delano sometimes, they're just guys who, the minute they get it, they're so invested in the fact that they finally got the ball that they're like, I better do something with this. Like, I better score because I might not get it back for another 7 or 8 possessions. This is going to take some time, guys. I don't know how long Fred VanVleet is expected to be out with this illness. I'm assuming he will be back either the next game or the game after. So I don't think that we're going to have a very long run to evaluate what this team can be. Now to my final thoughts. I made a video several days ago, it was about a week ago, entitled The Real Reason Some Teams Play Better Without Their Stars. And in it, my premise was that there's no way that anyone should say that the Raptors are better without Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam. They're not. You can't be better without players that are that talented. You can, however, play better. You can't be better, but you can play better. There is a distinction. You can play a style of basketball that is more conducive to milking out the maximum level of your talent base. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 5 players, and those players are capable of giving you either 0% of their full potential or 100% of their full potential on any given night. Obviously, if a team of absolute G Leaguers puts their 100% effort and you maximize the offense to get out the 100% most out of that lineup, that team will still lose to a team of 5 Hall of Famers who are playing in a very inefficient style that is maybe working at 10% capacity. The gap is too large. Without Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, for the Raptors, the talent gap is probably too large. Both of those players provide scoring. They provide minutes where they're able to space the floor. They attract attention. They open up lanes for other people. But with those 2 players in the lineup, the Raptors seem committed to playing an inefficient brand of basketball. That's sort of the sad part about this. You're watching tonight as Gary Trent misses those shots, and you're thinking maybe Fred would have made a few of those shots, and that's the difference in the game. You're watching tonight as Chris Boucher is streaking into the paint, and there's a wide open shooter in the corner, and you know that passing is not his thing, and you're like, man, if that was Pascal Siakam just darting through the middle, that pass would be obvious. The Raptors are down talent. But from what I saw in the first half, this was a team that got 100% or close to 100% out of the guys on the court. People were used effectively. People moved effectively. People communicated effectively. Maybe I'm a basketball romantic, right? Maybe there's a part of me that needs to adjust my thinking to the 21st century and know that there are contracts at stake here. And guys are going to gun for their shots every now and again. And I think that part of what I appreciate about Nick Nurse is that he's not an authoritarian, that he's not a dictator, that he seems to understand that individual and team have to find a way to coexist. Otherwise, there will always be friction. However, I do not think that the Raptors, for the most part of this season, have played to their strengths. I think players have routinely been put in positions in which they are almost guaranteed to be unsuccessful. I believe that the roles that certain players have been put into impact the effectiveness of their teammates. And so my issue and my premise has never been that the Raptors are more talented without Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. However, at least until the first half, I felt very good about the fact that the Raptors could play a better brand of basketball without one player dominating the ball for 20 seconds in a possession. It's a myth that you absolutely need a guy to close out possessions the way Pascal Siakam does. When Pascal Siakam is not out, it doesn't mean that Scottie Barnes or Gary Trent Jr. or Otto Porter have to take on the role of Pascal. No, ball movement can continue to generate good offense. I've seen really well-coached college teams, really well-coached NBA teams that will stick to their principles on offense. Old habits do die hard. Pensari basketball turns a year old today. This is our 1-year anniversary. It would have been really nice to get a win on our birthday. But I believe that the Raptors, especially with news that Cade Cunningham may be out for the Pistons, I do believe that the gap in talent between the Pistons and the Raptors will not be so extreme that the Raptors cannot get a win. Maybe the Pistons will have an explosive night from Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Sadiq Bey. There's a lot of talent. There's no team in the NBA that is a guaranteed loss. Every single night that you don't show up could be a blowout loss. And if you're someone who is considering leaning into the narrative that, of course, the Raptors lost, they can't win without Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, just look at the first half. I'm not saying that the first half is gospel. Even if they had won this game by 50 points, I would have been cautioning you that one game is not enough of a sample size. But the talent is there. More of it is needed, of course, but the talent is there. I don't like the lineups in the second half. I didn't like the minutes. I think Gary Trent Jr. coming back into the game was a mistake. The team immediately suffered for it. Just didn't have it tonight. It happens. It happens. Tough shooting night. Chalk it up to that. The Raptors miss a ton of bunnies. They face the most difficult team they're going to face over this four-game stretch, and they unfortunately have to do it with a 20-hour turnaround after that last game. Tough loss. I don't love the schedule so far for the Raptors. It's been a very tough schedule to come out of this. Like, when I was looking at the schedule to start the year with no knowledge of who would be injured or not, I had this idea that if the Raptors could just get to 500 after 20 games, that they were going to be sitting pretty on this season, and they sit after 14 games at 500. If you want my parting notes and or an optimistic thought to go to sleep to, or to wake up to if you're watching this tomorrow morning, it is that last year the Raptors were 7-7 after 14 games, and they moved to 7-8 after 15 games. So if the Raptors beat the Pistons on Monday, they will officially, despite having a much harder start to this year, be a little bit ahead of where they were last year. And if you consider where they ended up last year, consider the fact that they are a much better team this year, in my opinion, and frankly have a lot more talent that's a little bit further along. Once they get healthy, once this gets rolling, I think it'll be a good team. I preach patience. I will continue to preach patience on this team. I see the groundwork there for something good. Just some nights are not your night. So if you haven't hit subscribe, please make sure to hit subscribe, hit like. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think was the biggest culprit for the Raptors' loss tonight? And, you know, I did bet money on this game and I lost. So feel free to rub in the pie a little bit. I don't mind. This bet was made on principle. I have been talking so long that if you just ran the offense through Scottie, that things would be better. And I felt almost obliged that I had to make a bet to commemorate and almost put my money where my mouth is. And tonight I get served with a loss. And I felt that loss with the Raptors, and I'm sure that it was a tough loss for the team as well. But I think they competed hard. I think they tried. I think they just ran out of gas. Till next time, peace.